Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss groups. What I'm going to do today is I am going to give you what I think is hopefully like the best 20-minute encapsulation of groups. You'll notice that this touches on a lot of things that are in the book, such as leveling and other things. I won't necessarily use all the same terms that are used in the book. But what I'm hoping to do is to encapsulate a lot that's been reviewed, because there's a lot that goes on with leading a group, and to help give you maybe a bite-sized amount that can actually be held in your brain while you're leading a group. Now, that's not to say it's not still a lot of info. It is still a lot of info, but I hope that this can make it a little bit more memorable and maybe a little bit more usable and practical for you guys. A lot of you are doing really, really well in your leading the groups. In fact, I haven't seen a bad group leader, and it's one of those things where you just always grow and always progress. I hope as you guys are listening to this lecture, you think of ways that you could incorporate things when you're a group leader. If you being a group leader is already in the past, you could think of things that you could have done differently that may have been more beneficial for the group. And then also be thinking about these things as you are a group member in the future, so that you can be evaluating, looking at the group leader. Not for the reason of thinking, oh, I'm better than this person, this is what they should have done, but in order to be thinking, okay, what can I learn about what they're doing? Because it's always easier to be thinking about what you could have done when you're the observer. When you're the person in the hot seat and you're actually leading the group, well, that's when it's really tricky. So take advantage of sitting in the observer seat, in a sense, when you're a group member, and also pay attention to the group leader. And again, think of the things that he or she could do differently, things that he or she did that really worked well with the group. Be really active and engaged in thinking that way, so that you're learning about different parts of the group, no matter what role you particularly are in that week. Okay, so we're going to go through this. I've tried to keep it nice and crisp and clear. It's pretty brief. And again, like I said, a good bit of it has been covered already in your book. What I'm trying to just kind of do is bring it together in a more encapsulated way. Okay, so jumping in. So all group work is not group therapy, right? And there is some delineation in these groups. Now, I would say that these groups are not necessarily, like, there's not 100% agreement on these groups being delineated this way, but this is fairly common, the way we're going to talk about it. So group therapy is a lot of times used when actually what's really meant is group work. So we want to make sure that as professionals, we're more specific with that term. One of the big differences that you can identify somebody who's really trained in group work versus somebody who's not is how correctly they use these terms. If somebody uses group therapy when they're talking about group psychoeducation, that's a good indication they probably actually haven't been formally trained in group work. So again, group work is the general term. Group therapy is not the general term, but people who haven't been trained in it oftentimes use group therapy as a general term. Okay, so the general division of groups is a psychoeducational group, and the only qualification you need to have in order to be the leader in this group is you need to be knowledgeable in the topic. They're usually very directed by the leader of the group. They're not process groups. They're very much, we're here to learn something, we're here to work on this thing, this is what we're here to do, very, very directed. Then there's a task group. There's no education requirements for the leader. You've probably all been in task groups, right? In work, in school, you have an assignment, you have a project to get done. That is a task group. And then another one is group counseling. A master's degree is needed for this. And group counseling is when there's actually an issue that is being specifically talked. So this would be kind of where the process group fits in. This is what you guys are really being trained right now to do. And you guys are in that process group right now, learning to be that master's level clinician who can lead a group. And then group psychotherapy, also master's is needed. Now, group counseling and group psychotherapy, they're very similar. And oftentimes these words are used interchangeably. The difference between them is pretty subtle, and it's not super important for a lot of things, but the difference between them overall is that group counseling is more about day-to-day life issues and related to mental health, and usually a mental health diagnosis. Group psychotherapy is usually much more particularly aligned with the diagnosis and working with the diagnosis, functioning in life with the diagnosis. So again, there's a lot of overlap there. The difference is pretty subtle. Okay, so again, group work is the general term for all of these things. And then you can see these three pictures here. Are those two pictures? Sorry, I thought I had the third. So you can see that even though these pictures are very similar, if you were just to walk by a room and glance in, you can tell things about these two different groups. So this group right here looks much more like a task group, right? Everybody's got their water bottles and their computers. This would probably be a very poor arrangement for a process group, for example, right? Everybody's got all these barriers between them, this big desk between them, but it's a good setup for a task group. And then on the other hand, you have this group. This looks more like a process group. Everybody's around. There's no tables. No one's holding on to things. Everybody's like facing each other. So just in this simple pictures, we can see that what the group is will change how the group is set up and structured in a lot of different ways, even for something as basic as what does the group look like when they're all together. Okay. So there are a lot more than 5 group roles, a lot more. We're going to review 5 common ones, and what I've done is I've paired them with another group role that is not the same role. They are different, but they're group roles that often go together. Not always, absolutely not always, but not uncommonly go together. So we're going to actually review 10 here, but again, they're in pairs, if you will. So the first one is the peacekeeper or protector. So again, the peacekeeper and the protector don't have to be the same role, but they are not uncommonly the same role. They could be different people, or you could not have either one of them in your group. Knowing about group roles does not mean that every single group you have will have all of these. Learning about the group roles can just help you identify patterns more readily, and you can have a plan of how you would deal with someone that occupying that group role in your group. There is sometimes people don't want to study group roles because they don't want to stereotype people, and I see that the point to that. What I would say to that is I think there's a difference between being aware of group roles and how they influence the group, and then knowing how you would handle that, and then saying, oh, this person is this person, therefore I'm pigeonholing them and only going to interact with them as this role. And certainly we shouldn't do the latter, but there is a lot that goes on in group, and I think any advanced understanding we can have of typical patterns that people fall into in groups and make plans to address those and see how they work in a group, make plans for how to utilize those individual characteristics, the strengths, and maybe make a plan for how we can help the individual to avoid some things in that group role that might hurt the group and the individual. That's all going to be helpful for the group as a whole. So the peacekeeper, right? That's the person who, sometimes they'll want to cut off the work that a group is doing if it gets uncomfortable, because they want the peace to be kept, and it doesn't matter if things are getting real and good. They're always afraid of things being real and bad. Oftentimes, of course, this goes to family history that they had. So again, peacekeeper can be good in a group because they can be interested in helping everybody get a voice. They can also, a negative that they could bring into the group is that they could stop things from getting real. The protector can be good because they can show care and concern for different people in the group. They can become bad because then they can set themselves up as the person who needs to take care of somebody, stopping that individual from taking care of themselves, developing their own voice. And then oftentimes the protector of a group will have to define an enemy. They will have to, and if there isn't really an enemy there, they will have to create an enemy in order to perpetuate the belief they have about themselves of being the protector. There's the quiet and victim. So quiet, again, doesn't necessarily mean, this isn't necessarily a person who's like reluctant, who doesn't want to be there. This could just be their quiet. Now, they might not want to be there, right? They might be very quiet because they don't want to be there. They could be very quiet because they just really want to be invited into the conversation, and unless they're invited, they will not assume that anybody wants to hear from them. The victim, sometimes the quiet person will be quiet because they're playing the role of the victim, and I'm not going to say anything because no one would understand what I'm going to say anyway. No one understands what I'm going through anyway. Everybody's just all going to think they know me and think they know my situation, or they're going to tell me what to do. So I'm just gonna be quiet. I'm not going to do anything. So that's something that the victim could do. The victim, of course, could also actually be a wronged party, and a wronged party that is still primarily identifying with having been wronged, rather than having made that switch yet into saying, yes, I was wronged, that's not my identity. And again, something group therapy can really help somebody do is move from that belief of themselves as a victim to, yes, I was somebody who somebody wronged. I'm going to move forward not in a victim identity anymore. Non-engaging, too cool to be here. So again, this is kind of similar to what we talked about earlier, but usually these ones have a little bit more of an aggressive bent to them. The quiet and the victim don't necessarily usually have an aggressive bent bent to them, but the non-engaging, too cool to be here, can sometimes have an aggressive or a passive-aggressive bent to them. And sometimes they can demean other people who are trying to participate in the group, maybe belittle their contributions or invalidate them. "Ugh, you guys all talking about your feelings at group," or they'll say things to kind of just diminish everybody in the group with the intention kind of squashing the whole group. Again, non-engaging can come from other aspects. I see non-engaging a lot when I work with teenagers, and it's very, it's got that aggressive, passive-aggressive bent to it. A lot of times it comes from this really deep insecurity. They really want to make sure that they're going to be safe and valued in the group, and as soon as they know that, then they switch to engaging. And then sometimes the too cool to be here can, again, it can have that root of insecurity as well. And sometimes it can be pride as well. And the individual will think, "I don't need to learn anything from you guys." And again, that's where it can kind of lead to shutting the other people down. The talker, or the sharer/overshare. So again, a talker might just be a talker. They'll talk all day, they'll take up all the group time, but they're not actually saying anything that's really valuable, or they're not actually really even saying anything about themselves. They're talking a long time about cloud formations. Well, that's not why we're in a process group, is it? To talk about cloud formations. So sometimes the talker can kind of be talking as a smoke screen. Don't pay attention, don't ask questions. I'm going to talk so much and say so many words, you won't notice that I'm actually not sharing anything with the group. But because you heard me talk a lot and you're not keeping track of if I'm actually saying anything real or not, you just remember that I talk a lot. And so they use that as kind of a smoke screen to kind of fake you out so that you won't really realize that they're not really participating in the group. Because, hey, they're talking, right? And then you have a share or the overshare. And this is, again, exactly what it sounds like. This could be the person who, they will be sharing often things that are too much for the group. Either too much of it in quantity or too much of it in quality. They will be sharing very deep, personal, sensitive issues very early on in group, and that is a burden that that relationship is not strong enough to bear, or especially early on in a group. Some things never is a group really meant to bear, but especially early on. And so those are things that as a group leader you need to think, okay, how would I handle that? How would I handle that if somebody's going down the path of sharing and revealing something that is really a boundary violation, or really it's getting into territory that we as a group cannot safely handle? Okay, and the last one we're going to talk about is leader junior / I know it all already. Now again, leader junior can sometimes be a very helpful role. They really are trying to help the leader. They really want to assist you. Sometimes leader junior is like, I could do it better than you could. Yeah. So leader junior can kind of be two different things. And then the I know it all already, that could be the person who's, I've done this class already, or I've taken this group already, I've been a part of this group already, I've been a part of so many groups, I just know this all already. And again, one of them is trying to fill a need in their identity usually, or maybe subtly hinting that they do not think the leader is qualified to be the leader, and so they need to take over as leader junior. And then the I know it all already person is oftentimes it's coming from a place of being in this group is somehow making me feel that I am inadequate in some way. There's some insecurity I have about being in this group, such that I'm having to have the not just the defense, but I'm having to have an offense of saying, yeah, I know this already. I know it. Don't you think I don't know it? I know it. Which I'm sure you can imagine could lead often to a group being shut down, everybody else in the group being afraid to kind of really express themselves, or they can be belittled or diminished or cut off by this other person. So these group rules, again, a lot of them have positive and negative qualities. They are not uncommon. These are some of the most common ones that I see. Again, they do not all show up in every group, but these are some pretty common ones. And again, they are not always paired together, but it's not uncommon when they're paired together. Okay, So Yalom's therapeutic factors, he has a lot. We're just going to go over the main three. Universality, feeling of having problems similar to others, not alone. So this is obviously a great thing that group does that you really can't do in group individual therapy, because it's really not appropriate in individual therapy for the counselor to say, I know how you feel, or I've been there. Oh yeah, the same thing happened to me. That's not appropriate in individual counseling. However, it's very appropriate in group counseling for a group member to say to another. I'm not particularly talking about saying, yeah, I know how you feel, because of course we all know about that one. But those are statements of universality that can happen within a group that are very appropriate, that would not be appropriate to happen in individual counseling. Altruism, helping and supporting others. Group members love the feeling of helping and supporting each other. Very often there will be members in the group that will support and identify particular things about particular group members that need to be supported and strengthened. And they will all kind of agree to do that, a lot of times without any plan or intention to do so. It's a beautiful thing to see, and everybody will feel better from having done it, not just the supported party. And then installation of hope. This is encouragement that recovery is possible. Again, they're seeing other people. They're hearing other stories. It's not just tunnel vision on their own problems in their own life. They're hearing other perspectives. They're hearing other times this thing failed for this person, but then they recovered. Then they got up again and tried again, and this worked for them. They're getting to hear all of those things, which gives them encouragement. So these are the three big therapeutic factors that are most commonly, I would say, talked about in group. Yalom, of course, has a lot more factors. We're not going to go over all of them, though, but there's a lot. Obviously, you can pause it if you want to make sure you look at all of these. I know you're getting exposure to Yalom's factors other than that, too. So group process, we all know these, right? Form, storm, norm, perform, adjourn. Okay, so one of the cool things that I think... one of the things I think is cool about these stages is that you will not only see them over the course of a group. So let's say you're doing a 10-week group for an hour and a half each Tuesday, right? You will not only see these processes take place over that 10 weeks. You know, like the first week will be mostly form, the second week will be a little bit of form, a little bit of storm, or whatever, right? You will not only see it take place over the 10 weeks, but you will actually see it take place within each group hour and a half session as well. And that's something I think is amazing to see, that you see it on a macro and a micro scale within groups. So keep that in mind next time you're doing a group. Just the hour and a half session that you guys have, when you're seeing the form, storm, norm, perform, adjourn stage. Again, sometimes it's clearer than others, but you can look at it in that little microcosm of that 1.5 hour session and track it. And it's much easier to track within a 1.5 hour session than it is over 10 weeks. Obviously, though, especially since you guys know, you can see it within the 10 weeks as well. Another thing that I think is really cool about these group stages, group process, is that it's true for pretty much any group. Whether it's a formal group, one of the things I always have my classes do is they will identify at what stage we are in now in the semester for the class, right? Because it's true of any group, even a group that may not conform to what we normally think of as a group. We think of it as a class, but it's still going to follow these stages. Okay, so just to kind of put it together on one page, group leader duties. And this is something I've talked to a few of you about, saying, okay, what do I do as a group leader? Okay, one of the things you need to do is create space. Now, this is hard to do online. It's not impossible to do. There are a few things that you can do that help. I'm sure some of you have noticed that some of your group leaders are very prepared. They have handouts that they've already given to you. They're making sure their tech and their mic is working well. They're making sure that the background behind them when they're on the screen is something that's nice and sedate and serene, and not like a background where there's a lot of stuff going on. Those are things that you can do right there that help create the space. When you're in person, one of the things I always encourage my class to do is think about what you can control, because it's really obvious the things you can't control. And when I first started working, I'm not joking, I had to do some work in what was the janitor's closet in a school that I worked at for a while. I was going around to different schools doing some work. And so one of the things I had to think is, okay, what can I do? There's a lot I can't do anything about. So what can I do? Okay. There's a lamp here. I can bring a scarf to put over the lamp to, change the lighting. okay, I can, bring an air freshener to change the scent, or you know what I mean? Like, and it was really okay, what can I do? Because there was a lot I couldn't do, and it's really easy to get fixated on what you can't do. So instead, think, okay, what can you do? One of the challenges that I always gave my group class in the past was, okay, when you're the one in charge of the group and you're the group leader, your job is also to change the group environment or the classroom environment like you would change. And so I had students who would turn off the lights and like bring in flashlights and flashlight candles. I had students who would open the windows, close the windows, bring scarves to hang. They'd draw things on the whiteboard to create moods. They bring things for smells. And so one of the things they were just really thinking is, they rearrange the tables, rearrange the chairs. But one of the things they're just really getting in the habit of thinking is, okay, what can I control to create the space that I want to control or that I want to create for my group? You need to keep the group on track if applicable. Some groups don't necessarily need to be kept on track, but some groups do. However, it's important to keep in mind that you want to make sure that you're keeping the group on track appropriately. I always say that if the group leader is the one talking the most, they're doing something wrong. Because really, again, there's a few exceptions to that. There are a couple, like a psychoeducational group would be a little bit different when the group leader is very authoritative and very, saying what needs to happen and what needs to happen and making sure, right, that's going to be very, very led. That group leader is probably going to be speaking a lot. But in something like a process group, the group leader should be stepping back a lot. They'll be like throwing things out and then kind of stepping back. And the group leader, as the group leader, will not be talking very much, will not be directing very much. So they will want to keep the group on track, but they want to make sure they're keeping the group on track as in addition to allowing the group to do its own process work. So if the group topic is, dealing with a recent death of a loved one, then there might be quite a bit that goes off topic. However, if they've been talking about last week's football game for a little bit, that might be like, okay guys, and back on topic. Now, could talking about last week's football game be related to topic, especially in Texas apparently? Absolutely, it could be. But it might not be too, and the group leader needs to be paying attention so that they can tell when the group has truly gone off topic, not when they're just on a tangential topic. There's a difference. Another thing is to provide room for each group member. Now, I disagree a little bit on some people, the leveling and such, saying that everybody should, speak, generally speaking, about the same. I don't necessarily hold to that. I do think that there should be space created for everybody such that everybody can talk. But some weeks one person is going to have more to say than another person, et cetera, et cetera. I think the difficulty arises when we just allow the people who naturally would talk to just take the space. And then everybody who maybe is a little bit more reticent to talk, they just don't get any space. Sometimes talkers are, like a gas, and they will just fill whatever space they have. And we need to make sure that we as group leaders are balancing individuals, right? So we need to invite others to talk. Now, sometimes if we have group members who aren't really wanting to speak that much, sometimes, for a while, that can be okay. One of the things we need to make sure, though, that we're still doing is consistently inviting them to join in and not just letting them not talk, and that's okay. So, for instance, it might be, Bob, I haven't heard much from you today. Do you have anything to add to the conversation? Or, Bob, what are your thoughts about this topic? Right? And what you're doing is you're specifically inviting them into the conversation. Now you will notice that was the first question I asked was a closed-ended question, and the reason that can be good sometimes to ask a closed-ended question to people who have high levels of anxiety is because it's less anxiety-provoking for them to answer a direct question with a yes or a no. A lot of times in a group setting, a lot of times, well, in all settings, you wouldn't want to ask that many closed-ended questions. But occasionally there can be a reason to ask a closed-ended question. Again, especially in a group setting, especially with somebody who might have super high anxiety. You want to protect group members from abuse in the group. In my experience, one of the first people that people are usually willing to abuse is the group leader. And I've seen this when I've been a group member, a leader assistant, and a leader. Oftentimes what people will do in the group who are intending to be bullies is maybe they won't think in their head, I'm intending to be a bully. But what they'll want to do is they want things to be their way, and that's just the way it's going to be. And if it's not going to be their way, well, that's just the end of it. Usually what they'll do first is attack the group leader, attack the person that they see as authority, having authority. And they'll usually try to get different people in the group to jump on their bandwagon to attack that individual. One of the things that needs to be done by the group leader is for that to be stopped, just absolutely in its tracks. Don't do that. And one of the reasons for that is not because you're protecting yourself or you're defending yourself, but because if you don't do that, then what you have taught that individual and that whole group is that abuse is okay in the group. So oftentimes a lot of students will say, well, I don't want to defend myself. I don't want to say anything. I mean, if they do it to me, like, that's okay. If they did it to somebody else, I'd say something. And one of the things I always think is you need to stop it after it happens to you. You want to come at it from the standpoint of like, hey, I'm not being a jerk to you. You're a loser because you were a jerk to the leader. No, that's not like the spirit we need to come at them. But we do need to come with the spirit of that is not to be tolerated. That will not be tolerated against me. It will not be tolerated against anybody. And I'm always thankful if it happens to me first before any group members, because then that means I can bear it. Like I can handle somebody being a jerk to me. Like that's fine. If it happens to somebody else and I have to step in, it's actually much harder. So be thankful if it happens to you, because then you can very swiftly come down on it with, leave no room for doubt that will not be tolerated. And then everybody in the group will know that. Right? You want to facilitate meaningful exploration and discussion of topic as the group leader. So again, not just having everybody talk. You could have a group where everybody talks the whole time and nothing meaningful happened. You as the group leader are in charge of facilitating meaningful discussion and exploration, which means you have to really listen to what is said and what is not said. And then you need to set standards for the group. So a big one is comfort with silence. If you as a group leader are not comfortable with silence, the group will not be comfortable with silence. You need to be comfortable with silence. Oftentimes when I start leading a group, one of the first things that I do early on is I ask a question, I throw it out to the group, and I know there's going to be a little bit of silence, and I just embrace the silence, and we sit there for a while, usually. And then somebody will be like, okay, fine, I'll say something. Sometimes it happens that everybody just wants to talk the whole time, and we don't have that. But when we do have that, what I do is I just embrace the silence. And when I'm comfortable with the silence, and I show that I'm comfortable with silence, everybody else will be too, usually. And that is where a lot of work happens, in the silence, when people are really thinking. They're not just awkwardly going, who's going to talk? Who's going to talk? Who's going to talk? But what they're really doing is they're embracing the silence, and they're sitting there with that question, and they're sitting there with that thought and those feelings and that experience. And they're forming a way to express it, and then they share it with the group. Right? You want that silence. Because think about it, if there's not silence, that means there's not thinking and processing going on, unless they're either processing only while they're talking, or they're processing only while somebody else is talking and they're not listening to them. So silence is really crucial for a group. Again, silence that you have set to not be awkward, useless silence, but silence that really people are embracing and thinking and processing with that silence. They're using it as time to inwardly reflect, to then bring out to the group. This should not be confused with activities in group that have people like looking down at a piece of paper for a long period of time. I would say unless you're leading a psycho-ed group, you want to stay away from activities that have people step out of the group for a long period of time, such as like a 5-minute writing assignment, and then they bring it back to the group. I'm not saying it would never be a good idea. I'm not saying that. But what it can really lead to is a breaking up in the group process and growth. Because essentially what happened is everybody just retreated for 5-10 minutes, however long you said it, and then they kind of come back. And so it's really not as much of a group in a sense as it is, we all just did this stuff and now we're all telling each other about it. That's not group, right? Group is really when the processing happens together. So certainly there can be some activities that pull away from group for a little bit, but I'd be very cautious with those. I try to keep most of your activities that keep people in the group the whole time. Okay, so if your head is spinning, saying, okay, I got therapeutic factors, I've got different roles I have to keep track of that different group members might have, and then there's different stages that I need to keep track of too, and then I need to do these things as well. If your head is spinning and you think that is too much, then actually I think that really is a good indicator. People who think that, oh yeah, groups, whatever, just people talk, those are people that usually don't get anywhere. And sometimes they've been leading groups for like 10, 15, 20 years, and they're still leading groups at like a, first year level. because they're not challenging, they're not growing, they're not doing these things they really need to be doing. And so there's no growth, there's no projection, there's no transformative experience happening in the group because the group leader doesn't know how to help that process develop. Okay, so these are just some funny videos about groups that we would watch if we had the time. We don't have the time. So this is just, like I said, there's just a kind of a quick-ish recap that I wanted to do of groups. Like always, if you have any questions or comments about this video, about any of your experiences that you're having in group, any of the experiences you're having in the community groups, let me know. I'm here for you.